Let's have a look at the selling process. But what I'd like to do is just compare that to the buying process and take you through some psychology that both the sellers and the buyers are going through, and just see if there's a way that we can optimize and bring the two into alignment. Okay. Fundamentally, when people are selling, they're going through sort of a 5-step process, or you could say they're going through a 5-step process. You're prospecting for new opportunities, qualifying the opportunities, finding out about the opportunities, discovering what the needs are. Then you make an offer, some sort of bid, and then there's a process of closing. Now, these are all actually separate processes. In large capital equipment projects, for example, this might take 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Things like a nuclear power station, I'm sure that the actual process probably takes something like 20 years to go through. If you're retailing, then the whole thing might go through in a minute or two. So the time frame can vary greatly depending on your business and market. But fundamentally, this is the way that the process works. Then if we look at both the seller and the buyer and what's going through their minds as we're going through the process. When you're prospecting, the seller's really looking for, well, what are the triggers? What's the pain? What's the added value that can be had? And that's really what the seller wants to talk about when they're prospecting. For the buyer's in one of three modes really. They're sort of in growth mode, so they're looking for opportunity, they're looking to do things, they're looking to fix problems that are associated with growth mode. Everything's positive, but they need to get things done so they can grow. Or they might be in panic mode, they've got a problem, so they need to make an emergency purchase because a piece of plant's broken down, or they have a business problem. And they really need to find a solution to that problem. They're kind of the two extremes. Most businesses are sort of in even keel. Nothing's broken, nothing's growing. They're just kind of sat there, and they're actually the hardest to sell to because they're not really looking for solutions because they don't perceive they've got problems. However, that's about 85% of the market is sort of in even keel at any point in time. Now, what the buyers are looking for really in the prospecting mode is what are their needs? When they're talking to you, they're more interested in their needs, and they might be putting together a spec document, they might be thinking about things. They're interested in price, and they're interested in the seller's credibility. We then get into the qualification section where the seller needs to be trying to figure out what are the compelling reasons for this person going to buy. Are they just tire kickers, or are they actually going to buy? When are they going to buy? Because they want to focus their resources on the most immediate opportunity. Is there a budget? Does the seller really understand the buyer's needs? Does the seller's solution fit? Are they trying to sell something that really doesn't fit very well? It might be in that case they choose to qualify out, or it might be they can change the solution. What resources are required in order to win the bid and deliver the solution? And will it be profitable? Is there any money in doing this, or should we not bother? At this point in time, the buyer is really, maybe writing draft specifications, maybe thinking about it. They're looking at, is the financial standing and the experience and the support delivered by the seller good enough? They're looking at experience and coverage. Is the quality good? And just give me a guide as to what the price is. So, for example, if that was an engineering company buying plants, they would be looking at the engineering support and the experience of the company. If it was a shopper coming into a retail shop to buy a t-shirt or a suit, a much different thing. But what they're really looking at is the quality any good? Is this shop any good? If I come back in with a problem, will I get an exchange, or will I get my money back? So it's different scales of risks that they're looking at, but nevertheless they are looking at similar sorts of things. And again, they're still looking at the needs. They're not so much looking at price at this point. They're looking more at credibility and the solution fit. So what's really happening at that point is rapport being developed. If we then look at the discovery mode, the seller's looking at, well, how am I going to close this deal? What are the real needs? What are they telling me and what are they not telling me? Does my solution have a value? What is the value of it? Can I articulate that? And how will the real decision be taken? For the buyer, they're looking at options. What are the options? Which supplier am I going to be able to work with best? Who do I trust? So again, capital equipment or software projects or hardware projects or business to business projects, then you can imagine where there's a number of suppliers that are bidding. Retail environment, when the buyer's coming in, they go into a number of shops. Who do I like best? When I shop, I actually shop a lot based on the service I actually get in the shop. So salesmen can sell to me if they do the right things, and I walk in a number of shops and then I go back to the one I like. The price isn't really going to make a great deal of difference one way or the other. It's where do I feel better buying my clothes or my electrical goods or whatever. So at that point, the concerns are really around solutions, needs, and the credibility. We get into the bidding process. So for the seller, we're looking at, are all the influencers sold to? Does the proposal cover the needs? Is the solution fit? Are the benefits? What are the real alternatives? And what are the risks that the buyer is going to have? Is there a clear plan? Does the buyer understand how to go from A to B to C? And is there clear value? The buyer at this point is looking at, well, what's my best options? How am I going to justify this? What's the risk? At this point it starts to become a little bit more risk orientated for the buyer. They're about to spend their money. They're about to make a decision that their career might depend on. So what's the fallback, and what's the real feasibility? Can we put this project together? Can we make it work? So they're much more focused on the solution, but also the risk mitigation at this point comes in. So the credibility of the seller is quite important. And what at that point we're trying to do is to build trust. Then we get into the closing phase. So can the buyer actually say yes? Are all the objections handled? Does the buyer agree to the value? Is the next step easy? And have I actually asked for the order? And from the buyer's point of view, what's the best value? Not the lowest price, but the best value. Is the risk manageable? Are the terms acceptable? And logistics, do I understand the logistics? And in a corporate scenario, can I get approval for this? So at this point in time, the biggest issue in the mind of the buyer is more about risk. Price is there, but it's risk. What's the risk if this goes wrong? Because I would have qualified out of if the price wasn't right earlier in the process. And this is where we're really looking for commitment. So they're the sort of the 5 cycles, the 5 modes of buying, and that's the different mentality. Now obviously the better sellers think more about what's going on in the minds of the buyers so that they can actually address those. The more inexperienced sellers focus on the green line, and the really inexperienced sellers have no clue that there's actually a process that we go through. So each of those areas there, you can imagine different scripts, different statements, different pieces of collateral would be useful at different points. So just jumping in and talking about price in the discovery phase is not going to be particularly effective unless price was the prime thing the buyer was buying on, which is very unusual.